Hi, everyone. Just had a little slideshow going while people continue to filter in. My name's Katie Garth. I am the web liaison and a board member for the Mid-America Print Council. And I'm joined by many people tonight, but one of whom is a co-host who I'm waiting for him to appear here momentarily. Hi, everybody. So I'm Katie Garth. This is Steve Garst, weirdly similar last names for no particular reason. And we're really excited to welcome you here tonight to talk about our great big printmaking grad school spreadsheet and to hear from some amazing panelists from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, Cranbrook Academy, and Ohio University. So we're going to get started. Steve, who has shouldered the work of putting together the spreadsheet itself as a resource that is public facing for all prospective grad school applicants and students. Steve will sort of take you through the spreadsheet and explain how to look at it, what's there, if you need to change it, how you can get in touch with us and do things like that as well. So Steve will do that, and then we'll hand it off to the presenters. We'll have, after they give their introduction, Steve and I will ask some questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from all of you. So please use the Q&A. Let us know what questions you want to ask, and we'll try to get to them as best we can. So Steve, do you want to go ahead and?
Great, yeah. So I just shared a link to the spreadsheet in the chat. So hopefully you all can access that and see that directly on your own computers. So let me tell you a little bit about the spreadsheet. So this is a project that I've been working on for the last year or so. I gathered a list of schools from NASAT as well as a few other sources. We sent out requests for information from about 150 schools. We got a really good amount of responses from them. All of the answers on the spreadsheet are user submitted, so they are all freely given by the universities. So if you have questions about those, there are contacts on each individual university for you to ask further questions to. But hopefully it can be a really good resource for all of you as you consider what graduate options you have ahead of you. My goal is that this will continue to be a free resource for folks as long as they need it. Of course, it will occasionally get out of date, but fingers crossed we can keep it going and keep things as up to date as we can with, within what we could expect. So I'm going to share my screen. And so if you can all see my screen, this should be the same place. So the link that I shared was to the MAPC website where this link is going to live for the foreseeable future. If you look at the list, of course, first, thanks to all of the universities who helped supply the information. I couldn't have done this without them. This would have taken me years of data gathering to try and put it all together myself without the assistance of those schools. Additionally, a big thanks to all the folks who helped me put this together. As you can see up in the top, there is a email address for the Mid-American Print Council. If you would like to be included on it and are not on it right now, or if you need to make changes, please reach out to that email address. I have a Google form that I can send to schools that would like to be added, or of course can make changes based on specific requests. So as you look at the spreadsheet, each of the schools are listed alphabetically by state and then alphabetically inside of their state. So like California, for example, starts with Northridge and then goes to San Bernardino, so on and so forth. You all have a pretty good understanding of alphabetical order at this point. The first and most important pieces of information, we have the application URL as well as the tuition and assistantship information. As we continue to scroll across, we can see some explanations of those programs themselves, what they see as their own strengths We also have, following that, the ideal student. So this is a really great place for you to start to assess, is this a good program for me to apply to? Following that, we have the ADA accessibility of that program and the administrative support for equity and diversity inside of each specific program. What specific media are supported inside of the program. And then finally, we have a list of students and graduates who are willing to be contacted. So that way, if you have questions but want to kind of have a one-on-one conversation with someone who has already been through that program as a student, you can email those folks and get that feedback. All the people who are on this list have volunteered to be on that list, so they're willing to be contacted by you if you do have questions for them. So as we go through, we can see a whole list of schools. I'm not going to take the time to read through every single one of them, of course, but you can see all of that information as we go through. So I think we're at 43 last I checked for total universities, and are hoping to add a few more in the coming days as I've had some communications with some universities. So yeah, that's the big spreadsheet. Okay.
Thank you so much, Steve. That's so exciting. I'm sure there's resounding applause from every individual applicant or prospective applicant at their homes. And while we're on the topic of the spreadsheet, we do want to let you know, if you go to our website and you go to our news, which is our blog feature, there is a post that has sort of a permalink to this Google Doc. Obviously, you can share the Google Doc directly from the form as well. And we would really love for you to do this. If this could continue growing and be a really comprehensive resource, it would be to everyone's benefit. So share with peers that you notice aren't on the list if you are a graduate program director. And please, if you're a teacher or just somebody who's applying and knows other people who are applying, go ahead and please share this with former undergraduates, current students that are maybe about to graduate and thinking about things like this. I think for a lot of us, as we were talking about this and how useful of a resource it is, there was a lot of emphasis on even just the clarity of information around funding that we thought would be really helpful. So if you're willing to pass this on, hopefully this can be something that just continues to grow in terms of sharing. And like I said, we can get things to feel really comprehensive and transparent. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our first graduate program presenter. And the first people that we're going to hear from is the Cranbrook Academy of Art. And we have tonight Cooper Holoweski, who's going to let you know a little bit about that.
Great. Thank you, Katie. And thank you, Steve, and everybody involved in this. I know that when I think about when I was getting ready to go to grad school, something like this spreadsheet would be just like such an invaluable resource. So thanks for putting that together. I'm going to try and keep it brief. We have like 10 minutes allocated here, but it's a really difficult task to explain Cranbrook's print media department within those 10 minutes. So I'm going to do my best with just a few talking points. We take a very expansive approach to printmaking. And print in general. We are a very interdisciplinary program where we define print less through specific techniques and more through the ideas and concepts of multiples and distributions. So I like to kind of joke that that kind of encompasses everything from ancient woodcuts like the Diamond Sutra all the way to Instagram memes, right? So really when you think about the idea or the concepts of multiples and distribution or proliferation of images, sharing of images as a definition for the discipline, it becomes a really sort of expansive thing. At Cranbrook, we have a really unique approach to graduate education, and having drawn from my own graduate experience, not at Cranbrook, and having taught at other schools and visited a number of other schools. I can confidently say I've never seen anything like it. And I often tell people, if you're a good match for Cranbrook, there's no better place in the world for you. And if you are not a good match for Cranbrook, it'll be a very difficult 2 years. And by saying that, I think that people who are a good match for Cranbrook are people who are independently motivated and yeah, self-starting people who really take a proactive approach to their education. It doesn't mean that sort of people who are a little, yeah, anyway, it's really good for people who are very proactive. And part of the reason for that is because we don't have official classes. I guess I'll back up and say, first of all, it's also a graduate only program. So there's no undergrads. One of the perks of that is that we have an extremely clean and efficient print shop that we're not sharing with freshmen who are taking intro to printmaking. But I mentioned that we don't have classes because I think initially that sounds like something like sort of like structureless chaos. But there's actually kind of a remarkable amount of structure that's built into it that my colleague Emmy Bright and I sort of build into forming the education for our students. It looks a number of different ways, but one way that manifests, and I think particularly germane to the idea of being a graduate-only program, is that when I lead an etching demo, for example, when I'm teaching an etching class, it takes a semester to go through some of the fundamentals of etching, right? So like the basics of intaglio printmaking from like dry point, which obviously not technically etching, but using that as a framework or a starting point all the way to like sugar lift and aquatint and soap ground and things like that. It takes a semester. I cover that in about a 4 to 6 hour demo among grad students. And part of the way I'm able to do that is because everybody has a lot of sort of skin in the game, right? I'm not fighting for people's attention. People are very eager to be there. So yeah, one example when I think of the sort of structure of the program that I think kind of illustrates it is, so it's as much as I say it's a very like expansive view to printmaking, it's very interdisciplinary and not defined by specific techniques. It's very important to me that everybody walks away knowing the fundamental, the fundamental traditional printmaking techniques. So I will guide my students throughout the year. We'll do technical demonstrations that are required for everyone. So this like 4 to 6 hour etching demo, right? So everybody gets a sort of brief overview of etching, and some people really run with it, right? Like some people will take that demo and then spend their next 2 years doing a really deep dive on etching. And some people never make an etching after that again, but they have the sort of fundamental understanding of what intaglio and etching is as a result of that. Do the same thing with woodcuts, litho, silkscreen, all of that stuff. Yeah, what else? I think that was a lot. And it probably is, I would imagine, if I'm in your shoes as prospective students, I would assume that what I just said probably prompts more questions than it does answers. But I think I'm going to leave it at that and then wait for the Q&A to come in so I can answer some of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cooper, for letting us know about Cranbrook. I think if I were a prospective applicant right now, I would definitely have a lot of questions for you. And in fact, just because I'm a curious fellow printer, I do. So folks, be sure to add some questions in the Q&A. We definitely want to make sure that all of these questions, they can be big, they can be small, they can be for everybody, they can be for somebody in particular. So please don't be shy. Go ahead and add some questions to the Q&A, and we can sort of round out the discussion that way at the end here. Thank you. Yeah. So now we are going to turn it over to Sophie Isaac and Santiago Cal, who are representing the University of Nebraska at Lincoln.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you, Katie and Brett and Steve, for organizing this. So my name is Sophie Isaac. I'm the assistant professor of printmaking at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And this is Santiago Cal, my colleague. He is the professor of sculpture and graduate chair. So I thought it would be especially helpful to have him come and chat with you all along with me, just because he has a lot of answers regarding specific graduate studies and kind of oversees a lot to do with kind of like the nitty-gritty of graduate life here at UNL in the art department. So I guess I'll just start talking a little bit about the program and ask Santiago questions when they come up. And yeah, so the program is a 3-year program. And listening to Cooper talk, we also don't have a lot of like rigid course requirements. Graduate students can take focus hours or hours with any professor that they ask in the department. So if you enter into printmaking, you'll typically take hours with me, and then many students kind of have like a sort of secondary focus, whether it be sculpture or painting or photo. So they also request to take hours with another area. And each professor kind of runs their own hours with grads in different ways. So this semester, I meet with the Printmaking Grads every 2 weeks or so. And those meetings kind of range from critiques to demonstrations to, they might be doing readings and giving presentations on those, or sometimes we, like later on in the semester, we do more professional practices. So that's part of their study, is taking hours. And they're also, those are, a lot of critique hours too. So they'll have studio visits with me and then the other professors that they're taking hours with. Grads can also request hours with request studio visits with professors from other areas in the department as well. And so that's part of their course requirements. They're also, they take art history classes as well. And then oftentimes grads might take courses in other areas of the college. We also have an emerging media arts program that doesn't have graduate students, but grads can take hours there if they're interested in doing more like intermedia. And currently I have a graduate student doing projection design, taking a projection design class there. So that's kind of the official curriculum, I would say. And then they are also, grads also teach typically for their last 5 semesters. So they teach, their instructor of record in the intro level classes. And printmaking grads typically teach a 2D design course or a drawing class for their second semester of their first year, and then they go on to teach printmaking in their last 2 years. In addition to kind of like their responsibilities as a teacher and as a student, the printmaking studio, or we also have a really active print club, which is both grads and undergrads. And that's also kind of like an unofficial way for grads to share knowledge with each other. And I'm an advisor, but I also I just like let them kind of take over. Like next week, they're going to do cyanotypes with each other. And it's just like a nice like community bonding that they run. And they also partner frequently with the Sheldon Museum to do community printmaking events. And we kind of do local field trips in Lincoln. We're also going to the Lawrence Print Fair later this month and hoping to go to SGCI this year. So I guess also just about like kind of technical things. We have a pretty full print shop. We have an etching area with, 3 etching presses. We have ferric baths, rosin, aquatint box. We have a litho area with a lot of stones. And then we have a screen print studio that I've just been working on this past year. to kind of like get up and running. So we have a really nice new screen print area, as well as a letterpress area with Vandercook presses and type. And then those are kind of areas that are open for undergrad use. And then separate from that, there's a graduate printmaking studio that houses a larger French tool etching press and a litho press. So that's just like a private print studio for grads to work in. And then outside of that, they also have their own studios that are kind of like, they're private, but the walls only go up so far. So it's kind of nice. It's like a nice little bank of studios. They're pretty big. So we kind of take over the third floor of one building that's printmaking. Yeah, that's kind of all of the like nitty gritty about printmaking. And then maybe Santiago, maybe you could talk a little bit about like kind of what you do with the first year grads, or you know what questions they usually have when they enter.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sophie, and I apologize for my tardiness. I had the wrong time zone on my calendar, so I feel really awful.
That's what I figured, but I didn't want to. Yeah. I'm sure
it's just, yeah. Well, I take full responsibility. Yeah, so several things. Sophie, you're doing an amazing job leading the program, the print program, and I can feel the energy. It's really pretty dynamic in that area, both with the print club and the grad students and all the work that and engagement you've been doing. I did want to just mention that although Francisco Soto is our department, our school director, he's still actively engaged with the grad students, especially in printmaking. He serves on every print grad advisory committee, and they also have the opportunity to invite our emeritus faculty, Karen Kuntz, to also serve on their committee. And they also have opportunities to work with Karen at Constellation Studios, which is really vibrant. In terms of the graduate students, as they're entering the program, they're allocated or assigned, I should say, an advisory committee that consists of three to four studio faculty, an art historian, and they're always represented by the faculty of their area of emphasis. So in printmaking, it would be Sophie and Francisco would be on those committees, along with two other studio faculty from varying disciplines. And that could be from anything from emerging media, ceramics, painting, photography, sculpture, etc. They TA their first semester, so they get to work and learn how the classrooms are managed and how the courses are structured, and those are the courses they will then be teaching. So we don't throw them in blindly and say, teach a drawing course or teach a print course or whatever it might be, even though they may have a tremendous amount of knowledge in those particular areas. We still want them to understand the culture of how it's practiced here at UNL. We have, a pretty, for our program, we have, let's see here, we have 23 tenure track studio faculty members, or just total members, sorry, that includes 4 art historians and 5 design instructors. So we have a design program as well. And the students can, as Sophie mentioned, take hours with any of those faculty at any point. I offer an interdisciplinary, meeting with the grad students, and basically it's based on studio critique. So it's just a follow up on what Sophie is doing in printmaking. Although you're working with a media specific. In terms of the grad students, you're working with grad students from different disciplines. I work with grad students from across the disciplines. I have 2 printmakers right now, photographer, ceramicists, sculptors, drawing and painting students. And normally they're all, engaged in just thinking about using a variety of processes, media practices that extend beyond those particular disciplines, and they just want to learn how to better use those to develop their research. And collectively, we offer feedback from varying perspectives, and you know, it's pretty helpful, I think, and the students get excited to just be a community beyond their media practice. And that's pretty standard here at UNL. It's a tight-knit group. Let's see what else. Sophie, forgive me for being for asking this question, but are we talking about all the questions that are?
I don't think so. I think we have about 10 minutes, so I think we actually might be at our time.
Oh, we're at our time. I used it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was perfect. It was perfect because I think
Okay.
I'm glad that you mentioned other resources, like Karen, you know, taking hours with Karen at Constellation, or and Francisco, obviously, because right now,
Yeah.
although I'm the only faculty teaching undergrad printmakers, there's other faculty that advise with graduate students in printmaking specifically. So yes, thank you.
And they get a healthy dose of feedbacks and studio visits from visiting artist lectures, but they also do there's a visual artists in practice, which is a graduate-led organization, and it's cross-disciplinary again, and they do an annual event that invites the public, so they get collectors and members from the community to come and look at their work and give them feedback as well. I think that's what I got.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I'm looking forward to answering more questions later on in the Q&A time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie and Santiago. I'm just, as you're both sort of talking, I'm really struck by how nice it is to even have the opportunity to have a sense of the personalities at different departments, and just actually to know that there are real people behind that application portal that so many of these people are going to be spending a lot of time on. I think for those of you that are thinking about questions to ask, also remember while we're moving forward that everybody here also went to grad school. So all of these professors had to go through a program. They've been in your position before. And I'm sure that the memories of grad school are still remain very distinct for them. So if you have questions that are a little bit more general, just about how you choose a place or what type of culture you look for, what you think the pros and cons of different sizes of programs are, things like that, feel free to put those in the chat. I think there will be a lot of discussion that we can have around those ideas. So finally, last but not least, I'm going to hand this over to Ohio University. And from Ohio University, we have Melissa Haviland, Carla Hackenmiller, and Jack Garcia. So please welcome them.
Hi. I am very happy to be here. And thank you so much to MAPC for putting this together. I would have loved to be able to do exactly what you're saying, Katie, is just like get a sense of the energy through the people of the institutions that I was looking at, right? So I am going to show a video on that's like a walking tour of our shops while I talk. And then Carla Hackenmiller and Jack Garcia are going to speak when we get into the Q&As, and we sort of coordinated that. Jack Garcia is a third-year graduate student, so in the thesis year. And Carla Hackenmiller teaches with me and in the printmaking program, and is also our associate dean of the College of Fine Arts. I'm Melissa Haviland. I teach specifically screen print and paper making primarily, and and I am the chair of printmaking at Ohio University at the moment. So I'm going to take just 1 second to get this video ready, and then I will do our little spiel. And I also wanted to say how happy I was that UNL was presenting today too, because that's where I went to graduate school, graduated in 2002 and had Santiago as a professor. Ohio University Printmaking is a 3-year program. We consider ourselves interdisciplinary. Students do not necessarily make prints when they leave here or sometimes when they start. Very often they are making, basically we want students to make the work that they want to make, right? So the work, the concept that they want to approach. So we take it in a very interdisciplinary way. It's one of the reasons I really love the program. We have certainly have a intense focus in print. And so students can really luxuriate in the media that they choose, right? So we have a dedicated shop for lithography, etching relief, screen, and paper making. And then we also have a clean room, standard clean room, right, where you're prepping paper, but that also holds our archive. We've been collecting prints from students and visiting artists for about 60 years here. So that's housed in that room. And then soon we will be housing the MAPC archive there. Students have a private studio at the Ridges facility, which is an old mental institution. It is a beautiful old campus that looks over the whole of Athens, Ohio, up on the hill. And students either have a small studio that they have privately or a shared larger studio if the arrangement works out well for them. And there's a private graduate student print shop up at that facility as well. And what's amazing about that space is it really, and the program, is the connection to all the rest of the graduate students in the cohort. So we accept 3 students a year. So we usually are averaging about 9 printmakers at a time. And there's around 50 to 60 graduate students in all of studio art and in art history. And so most of those students are also up in the Ridges with our graduate students. And so we do not, sort of in a similar way to Cranbrook, we don't like teach tech in our classes. Our classes, in quotes, are critique-based situations, right? That sort of like give you a crit structure and a crit community. And we give you introductions to the media and go into more depth if needed, but primarily students are sharing knowledge with each other. You know, if students need to weld something, there is always someone here to do that. If they, you know, need to deep dive into mezzotint, there's someone we can talk to, right? So I love the print or the larger grad community. And so the printmakers seem to, you know, have a little cohort together, a community there, and then the larger community within the grad shops. We do try to fund our graduate students. I can't remember you know, in recent years that we did not. And so we try to fight the best we can to fund students to be here. And one of the reasons is that they're then teaching for us. And so we are a institution that trains teachers. So every graduate student takes the teaching seminar in the first semester. It gets them oriented to the classroom, gives them some classroom experience. And at the same time, and throughout that first year, they're being teaching assistants, either for foundations or for printmaking or both. And then as students, certainly we have students that are not interested in teaching. And so we, you know, start to, you know, use them in the gallery. We have all sorts of ways to work with them and train them in other ways, right? But those who are very interested in teaching, they almost can always be a teacher of record. So we don't have like a set system, but basically like I keep in good communication with all my grads, and I know who is interested in what, in teaching what, right? So we really attempt to train them to be teachers by the time they leave here, you know, as well as artists. As we also are within our graduate course structure, and at least in printmaking, we really emphasize in grant writing and internal funding, especially. We have a number of graduate student-based grants that our students are incredibly successful at getting. Jack Garcia's received one. Currently, one of our graduate students has one of the largest research grants that are in the College of Fine Arts, which is directly funding his thesis work. And I just really see it as one of the things that's been the most benefit for me, is to go from grant to grant. So I really try to help students to write them, and write them here in the protected community of the greenhouse, right, of graduate school. One of the other sort of like main things is that we're in Appalachia. I'd really like to emphasize to all of you who are looking for graduate schools to visit where you're thinking of, go to the place and consider place. I think place is incredibly important. Athens, Ohio is Southeast Ohio, very much in Appalachia. It's almost in West Virginia. It's in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. It is very unique. It is lots of access to outdoors. So very often students are hiking and paddleboarding as well as going to school, right? I often say that it's like being on vacation, but you have to work, right? So I also think that for me, at least, that sort of Appalachian scrappiness has sort of like been part of how we sort of like run and think of ourselves, you know, so we are, I don't know, up for almost anything. And we are really good, at problem solving through things. And I think, like all print shops, we are a community and we work together. But when I really am very proud of what the grads do. Our print club is really who makes decisions. It's primarily run by the grads, but has undergrad members as well. And they're the ones who decide on our visiting artists. They're also the ones who apply for the funding to get them in and assist with hosting. Though I certainly am here as a guide, I feel like I am actively training my peers, and have always been just, deeply inspired by this program. These last few images are of the Ridges facility. So this is where this is one of the students' private studios. So, and I will stop sharing, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Carla and Jack. I'm hopeful that we'll continue to get to hear a lot from you all later. So that is it for our sort of grad school introductions. Now we have a few questions that we have prepared that we thought might be particularly helpful to you all. And then after that, we'll open it up. We are getting some really awesome questions in the chat, ranging from really broad things to really specific things. So again, keep them coming. This is a great opportunity to get to hear from a lot of different print people at once. Steve, do you have the first question ready?
I think I do, yeah. So I would invite folks to kind of continue asking questions. Of course, as we ask these broader questions, any of the panelists who'd like to respond, please feel free to do so. But yeah, our first question is your program interdisciplinary? How do you define that? And is it easy to take courses outside of the printmaking department?
And why don't you all just come back? Let's get a good look at all of you. Awesome. Who wants to jump in?
I'll take it. Oh,
Nope,
if
go
someone
for it.
else wants to go for it.
I'll start. Our students are required to take work outside of print. And it was interesting because, as we were prepping for this, I was talking to all the grads about all this, and they were like, what? I never even thought that I had to make prints. Basically like they come in, and regardless of what their assumptions were, they immediately start to look at their larger cohort, critique in other situations, and really start to craft goals for their own work, and that then starts to control the media, right? So they are required to take stuff outside. It is part of our, the reason that we be, that's why we want to be here. And it also, I think, our interdisciplinarity is pushed by the larger cohort, right? So the bigger 50, 60 students really work share very well. And they're the reason I think that it becomes pretty successful. And again, some of our students, really lean into making traditional prints, and then others make video forever, right? So, and I think it's, again, we're just trying to get them to think about idea and whatever idea is needed.
Great. I'll take that one as well. Yeah, I think interdisciplinarity is something that in academia has, in the past 20 years, it's it's a thing. A word, interdisciplinary, is a word that's really crept up in a lot of academic settings. And I'll say that I think before that term was even used, it's sort of baked into the DNA of a place like Cranbrook. It's been around, Cranbrook has been around for 100 years, or we're just coming up on a 100-year anniversary, the Academy. And just by virtue of the structure. So the structure of the school is such that each department, we have 11 departments, including painting, sculpture, ceramics, all the, many typical graphic design departments. But each department has one artist in residence. So the artist in residence functions as the faculty, the mentor of that person. And very early on in the inception of Cranbrook, it was obviously very clear that one person cannot provide an education for the entire cohort of 12 people in totality, right? And so it was quite early adopted that students are asked to get, we have a review process where essentially all of my students get feedback from all of the other faculty at various points throughout the year in the review process. So there's ways in which interdisciplinarity is very formalized into the structure of Cranbrook, and also what I'm hearing at OU as well, where it's people are kind of required to work in different departments. There's also just a lot of opportunities for students who want to push that in a more in their own way. There's every department has certain requirements. We have a certain cadence to the week, right? So in print media, we have on Tuesdays, I do studio visits. On Wednesdays, we do critique. On Thursdays, we often have visiting artists, or we'll do I'll lead a seminar, we'll do a reading group or a workshop, or a field trip. And so there's certain days that are print media days, and then other departments, if a student wants to elect in medals, they essentially are sort of a surrogate student in that department, right? So on top of the requirements of print media, they also would join medals critiques and medals reading groups and whatever would be required by medals. So you can very much formalize that, but it's a really open system. So if a student is just interested in being a soft, we talk about capital E electives and lowercase e electives. So if somebody's vaguely interested in ceramics or fibers, they're welcome to go to the critiques. Every department has open critiques. There's also a lot of lateral learning that goes on. There's a series of student-led workshops. So As much as every department leads certain workshops, there's also student-led workshops. So we've had ones with students who led a hydro dipping workshop, and that was, for example, really highly attended by a lot of sculpture and industrial design students, but it was hosted by the print media department. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of different models for interdisciplinarity, and I think that historically a lot of like US higher education has been very siloed, and fortunately that's starting to change. And I think there's also this kind of polar opposite in a lot of European schools, or there's some schools in the US too, where it's like you apply through a program and then it's like totally, there's not really any kind of disciplinary focus. And I think one of the big selling points on Cranbrook is it strikes this real balance. It strikes this middle ground because it's been doing it for 100 years, right? Where there are parts of interdisciplinary sort of baked into the curriculum, and there are areas in which you, like, printmaking students very much feel like printmaking students, and they so there's that kind of like, I don't know, I think it's the best of both worlds. You have that sort of identity and that background of the way you make images, the way you make work, and yet you have access to all of these other departments and all this kind of knowledge from these different folks throughout campus.
Thank you so much, Cooper. Sophie or Santiago, do you want to add anything quickly there?
Well, I guess I'll just echo a little bit what we went over in the first introductions, that, you know, graduate students can take hours and with faculty from other areas. And I would say, I don't know, I think most of them do every semester. And I would also say, yeah, I think that printmaking identity, it is kind of on a spectrum, like your printiness, and it kind of ebbs and flows. So I think, you know, if you want to get really into paper making and box making, that's something that you might pursue with hours with Karen Kuntz. Whereas if you want to do print as installation, that's something you might talk to Santiago and myself about. So it's kind of, I hope to be here for the grads to kind of help funnel them into the right channels for who to talk to about certain things.
That is excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Our next question for you all, and maybe synthesized to the extent that it's possible. I know we're living in a grad school, and academia in general is a nexus of nuance and exceptions, but to the extent that you can you sort of quickly talk about what the feedback process is like for students from arrival through graduation? So I think some people, I know in my experience at Tyler, we had to have our committees formed by October of our first year because it was a 2-year program. I've talked to people at 3-year programs who didn't meet really anybody for the first 3 or 4 months they were there. They sort of took some time to wade into their work a little bit in the new place. So, you know, what are key academic milestones? How frequently do you end up meeting individually with each grad? Just give us a sense of that.
I can take that one. Hi, everybody. Thanks. At Ohio University, our grads are usually assigned a committee of 3 people early on. Certainly within the first month or so of courses. And they're assigned to printmaking faculty and then somebody from outside. So it might be an outside studio faculty member. It could be an art historian. And those 3 people ideally are with the student for the trajectory of their time with us. Sometimes people get switched out and the student can, you know, oftentimes in the 3rd year when their work starts to really evolve, they might want a 4th member on there, and so they can make those choices. But the students typically meet with each of the committee members at least a couple of times a semester, and certainly the students are in the critique classes that Melissa spoke about. So they have 2 sort of critique groups every term, one in printmaking, one outside of printmaking. So they get a lot of feedback from both those instructors as well as their peers. Toward the end of the first term, the students go through a progress review. So we're able to have the students sit down with their committee members in front of their work. They install what they've been working on through the fall term, and then we discuss how have things been going. We touch base and just, you know, see kind of where they're at, identify any issues, see where we might be able to offer some additional assistance. At the end of the first year, the student then goes through a candidacy review. Once again, they install work in a space, the committee gets together and has a formal process that we go through. And again, we're assessing where the student's at, how they've progressed from the time that they started to that point. Then in the second year, students are starting to think about their thesis proposal, which is preparation for their thesis exhibition in that third year. So they'll write their proposal, work with the committee members on that, and then go through a review process. And then in the third year, the students don't typically take courses. That is just really for them to focus on their studio work and to work on their thesis exhibition. So the next kind of big milestone and final milestone is their thesis defense in conjunction with their exhibition. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. What about Cranbrook or Lincoln?
Sure. Can you repeat the question? Actually, I'm like looking at it from previously, and it's like it's a lot. It's a big question.
Yeah, just you know, like what's the culture of studio visits like at your institution? How often might people expect to receive feedback? And then what are some of those key milestones? Like, do you just get one review before you mount your thesis show? How does just some of that work?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, so the rundown of kind of academic milestones includes, and this varies from department to department, but I'm going to speak specifically for print, is everybody has 2 group critiques per semester. Along with that, second year students do a research presentation. So because like many programs, it's very much focused on individualized studio practices. We ask students to dive deep into their research, and their research, in my mind, can be as academic or non-academic as one wants, right? Somebody can go really deep on Foucault or Deleuze, or they can also go really deep on the history of energy drinks, right? So like we've had research presentations run the gamut. All of these things kind of parlay into a graduate written thesis and a graduate exhibition. So in some ways, it's very cumulative. So we have these 2 critiques per semester. We have second year research presentations. There's first year and second year reviews, which as I vaguely kind of tapped on earlier, that's a moment where all first year students on campus will set up their work and get feedback from they'll get 5 or 6 studio visits from other artists in residence from other departments, as well as visiting artists. So that happens twice. It happens once during the first year, once during the second year, and they're structured slightly differently because we're a 2-year program. The second year review is a little bit more focused on preparing people for their GDE, their graduate degree exhibition. We also have a number of visiting artists. I bring in about 3 people per semester. And I'll say that the culture of studio visits on my end of it is very much focused on, it's very individualized and focused on unique, very specific student growth, right? Like I view studio visits as an opportunity to really exercise and kind of flex intellectual empathy, right? It's my moment to step outside of what I care about and really, really get into the headspace of the student and what their concerns are, what their research interests are, what they're interested in putting into their work, and helping them formulate different research methodologies, and also processes and materials for working, come up with artists and films and books and records for them to listen to, different things to kind of draw from that might inspire them or kind of push them away, right? Like, here's an example of an artist that's dealing with similar subject matter that's very different than you, and you may want to like sort of veer even farther, right? So it's really, studio visits are, I know, I'm sure we've all heard like horror stories of like people really kind of trying to poke holes in an argument or poke holes in one's work. And I generally don't approach studio visits that way. It's very much about building students up and helping their vision become the best it can be. And I generally, you know, I can't control like all the visiting artists, but I generally select people who have a similar approach, and folks that I will often kind of prep them a little bit in that direction as well. Yeah, very just deeply individualized, I guess, is the long and short of it. People will often ask, like, what's the curriculum? And I'm like, well, I have a cohort of 12 students right now, so I have 12 curriculum. Yeah.
Sophie, Santiago?
Sure. I guess I'll hop in a little bit about like the specifics of the print department, and then maybe Santiago will just add a little bit about committees at the end. So with my grads, as I mentioned, we meet every 2 weeks, and because it's a smaller cohort, we don't have critique every 2 weeks because there's just a handful of them in printmaking specifically. So we have 2 group critiques a semester, and then I try to meet with them. I mean, I officially in studio visits, probably individual ones at least twice a semester as well. Although I do feel like I interact with them quite frequently as they're making things, just because their studios are on the print floor. So it's a very like, kind of can be an informal atmosphere of us just kind of walking, you know, knocking on your studio and seeing what you're working on and seeing if you need help, or students coming into my office and chatting with me about a project that they're working on. And then, so besides, you know, studio visits with me, we also have visiting artists, visiting artists in each area every semester. So typically, and then we do studio visits with the visiting artists. And then also we've been doing, editioning a print with them as well, which is something, that the grads kind of take charge on, similar to what, Melissa said at Ohio. And then Santiago, do you want to just follow up about committees and how frequently they meet and how they're formed?
Sure. Hey, I just want to say hi to Melissa. It's really fantastic to see Melissa there. Yeah, so our committees, you know, this sounds like there's a lot of similarities and overlap in the way things are practiced. Our committees meet formally at the end of every semester. The students meet with their committee members several times throughout the semester, in addition to you know, the hours that they're taking with studio faculty. And as I mentioned initially, the committees are assigned to the students their first semester, but after their first semester, they get to tailor their committees to their best interest, and that has to do with, you know, their both their studio practice, but also their areas, you know, of research. And so they can, thinking like right now we have an African American Studies professor on one of our graduate students advisory committee. We've had students in the material and textile studies program. We've had poets come in and contribute. You know, they serve as voting members of the advisory committee. So the grad students really do take advantage of the entire university institution in terms of developing their research. The committees meet formally every semester, and in our program too, it's sort of based on a yearly milestone basis, whereas the first year you just, you know, get uncomfortable, do things, you know, break habits, you know, those kinds of things. Second year, you have to reflect and refine and deepen your thoughts, dig deep into your research. And then the third year is really like you focusing and preparing for your thesis exhibition and your oral defense of the work. So that's something.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you everybody for your answers. So I think we're gonna pull a little bit of an audible and skip our third question that we had prepared in order to try and cover some of the Q&A questions. And so we'll try to get to as many as we can, of course, but we'll just, again, kind of let you guys answer them in whatever way that you feel like you should. So our first question for the evening from the audience is from Carlissa Shaw, who asks, what is the size of a printmaking cohort, and do you think a large versus small cohort is better?
Well, I'll just start. I'm unmuted. Our cohort, as I mentioned, is pretty small. So right now, we have 3 students in printmaking. One of them is in painting and printmaking officially. And yeah, so it kind of makes it, that's also sort of lends itself to the interdisciplinary nature, because I feel like there is, you know, Santiago, are there 18 grads or overall, or something like, yeah. So it's a smaller group, so that they are kind of, it's less like printmaking, painting, ceramics. It's kind of more like they're all one group, I would say. And then as far as small versus large, I think that's one of those things that, you know, as Cooper mentioned at the beginning, it's kind of like it's good for you if it's good for you, or, you know, it kind of, I think it's an individual kind of thing. You know, it's definitely like, I think there's probably a different kind of experience with a bigger group. But I do think that is one of our strengths, I would say, is the intimacy of it. There's a lot of time with your faculty mentors. Yeah.
Our average size cohort is around 12, like it oscillates somewhere between 10 and 15 students. It's, again, a 2-year program, so typically that's about 6 to 7 in each year, although that, again, also oscillates. And whew, yeah, large versus small, which is better? Is that, yeah, I'm gonna agree with Sophie on this one. It really depends on what you're looking for. I guess for representing a school that has like a cohort sizes on the larger side, I guess the selling point I would say is you're getting more feedback, right? Again, I'll stress the sort of like communal and lateral learning that occurs at a place like Cranbrook. So if you're a printmaking student who's also interested in performance, with a larger cohort, you're likely to find another performer in the group, right? Yeah, I mean, there's also just sort of like communal and group dynamics that play out, right? When you have more people, there's like, in some ways, it's more exciting and more dynamic. And it's also like, you know, who's going to do the dishes in the kitchen, right? Like all these things that arise from all of the good and the bad. So it's hard to say which is better, but I guess I'll speak in personal experience. Like I went to RISD for grad school. We had cohorts around the same size, and I really thrived there. It was really helpful to have people who, if I, when I was going to grad school, I was not a litho expert, but my studio mate was, and I had a couple other people actually in my cohort who were like big time litho people, and I could really lean on them to get my litho chops up at that point. So.
Anybody from Ohio have anything to sort of cover that thematically hasn't been said? I think in these questions, we'll try to maybe not hear from everybody, if that's okay. You're good? Okay, excellent. We're getting a lot of awesome questions in the chat now, actually. And so I just want to take an aside to remind people that the PrintStream is affiliated with this amazing spreadsheet that Steve made. So a couple of points on that. Number one, tonight's event is being recorded. So we will have this available if you want to watch again and hear some things that you might have missed or just want to hear again. The spreadsheet itself has a lot of specific information on it in terms of funding, in terms of people describing their ideal students. I think some other things like location are in there. So do go ahead and look at those. And I think tonight we'll probably prioritize some more maybe like mushy questions that don't fit into a spreadsheet as well. There is also one question about students with disabilities and facilities. And I want to point out that we specifically asked all of the schools to talk about whether or not their facilities were fully ADA accessible. I think one of the things that's difficult and frustrating, particularly I imagine for people with physical disabilities, is that the definition of what meets that standard is sort of murky. It's not necessarily made particularly clear for people who run facilities, and oftentimes it takes a student with a particular disability to enter a space for it to be accommodated, which is incredibly frustrating and unfair. But I would just encourage you, if you're looking at these particular schools, to go ahead and reach out to people, let them know what you would need, and ask them what they have. So all of that said, for those more factual, perhaps, answers, another question, this comes from Erica Lewis, is, would you say that going to a prestigious program is the end-all be-all of a printmaking career? Should that be a priority when choosing where to apply? They said that they've been finding it's difficult to research programs and their outcomes.
It's a good question. I think it also, like, to not to throw it back on the participant who asked the other question, but it's like, what's the definition of prestigious, and what's the definition of like a successful printmaking career, right? Like, I think that can be taken in so many different directions. So like, I guess I'll speak to, and this is like in some ways why I'm like horrible at marketing my own program and my own school. It's like, I'm going to talk to like one thing we don't do well. It's like, get people ready for teaching, right? Like Cranbrook is a very kind of monastic scenario. And because we don't have undergrad, there's like there are some teaching opportunities through the museum, but like, there's not really a whole lot of teaching opportunities. So that's one, if you're looking to jump right into teaching. I mean, also there's a lot of teachers who went through the Cranbrook Print Media department who are teaching in higher ed now. But it's not focused on that. It's really focused on developing people's artistic voices. So I don't know. I think there's also certain schools that are really set up for training people to be master printers and work at places like Tamarind or Paste Prints or places like that. And certain schools are really set up for those sort of things. Again, like that's not necessarily what Cranbrook does, but I think that's like another sort of, in some people's minds, that's like a real benchmark of success, right? So I guess it's, yeah, just to recap, it's like, it kind of depends on what success looks like for you, but yeah, I think I would like, I want to also gotta echo a comment that a panelist said earlier, which is like just highly encouraging prospective students to come visit places, right? And I know it's really expensive to fly places and stay in hotels, but if you can narrow down your options to like 3 or so grad schools, it really makes a difference. And again, like I don't want to sort of overlook the financial component of that, but if you're going to dedicate 2 to 3 years of your life and potentially a lot of money towards tuition and taking out loans and living stipends and things like that, it really is absolutely worth it to come check out these places and just get a vibe for the place, right? Like understand the people you'll be working with and the place you would be working at.
Yeah, I'll jump in quickly. I think this was a question that I was like, as an before grad school, this was like something that like took up a lot of brain space for me. And I was super concerned about like, where should I go? How is that going to affect the rest of my life? And obviously it is a really important decision. And I think that, but I also think that like the work that you make, it is, and finding mentors that are going to help you make the best work, that is really what it's about. And I think, yeah, the success is determined in a lot of different ways. But especially just, I think the work that you make during this time is the most important thing. And that can mean a lot of different things depending on what you hope to pursue after. Yeah. And also, I'll say one more thing. Just also considering your, you know, the financial aspect. I think that was also something as a young person that, you know, when you're before grad school, when I was 18, signing up for student loans, didn't really think about that. So yeah. All right.
Yeah, I might just tag on to that too. I would agree it's a lot more about the fit than the reputation of the program, because at the end of the day, it's about you. Like, you have to make the work, put in the time, be dedicated, and you want to find the place that's going to allow you to do that in the best way. Our grads leave here and do all sorts of amazing things that we never would have dreamed were even possible. And, you know, some teach, some start their own businesses, some, you know, they're inventing new ways of being artists and being successful people. So, yeah, it comes down to what kind of a program is going to motivate you to do all the things that you really want to do in life.
Great, thank you. Really great answers. I love that question. I think that's one of those that I don't know that there's a right answer, but you know, we all kind of find places that we've been. So to keep moving, let's and I apologize if I mispronounce names on this, but I believe it's Ite Rogers Fett asks, how would you suggest to best prepare now if we're planning to apply for grad programs within the next 2 years? So how do you prepare to apply for programs?
Make. I just really think so much focus on the work, right? You know, make the things that are going to drive you, because that's also going to be the thing you can write about. It's going to be the thing you can talk about on the fly. And that's like your script, you know? So I'd say the portfolio first every time. Do your research and pay attention to things out there as well, but that's first and foremost.
I would echo that. I think the advice that I give to most people who are preparing for grad school is that you should, it's not that you can't apply or shouldn't apply with strong work that you have from undergrad, but one thing that I think is like a real, I wish someone had told me this when I was applying to grad school, or I had known this much younger, is that there's certain work that looks like it's obviously an assignment from a class, right? And as somebody who reviews a lot of graduate applications, I'll say like the most compelling ones are usually ones where I can see the applicant's unique voice, right? It's not, I mean, if there's something from a figure drawing class, it's also like a portfolio full of figure drawings where they're really exploring the figure, right? And it's not just sort of like, here's what I did for my ceramics class, and here's what I did for my figure drawing class, and things like that. So whether you're 2 years out and still in undergrad, or you're 2 years out and taking time off between undergrad and grad school, I think, yeah, I would absolutely echo Melissa's sentiments of like make, and think of what you're interested in. Like, what do you talk about with your friends on the side? It doesn't have to always be super art historical, but like, what keeps you up at night? What gets you up in the morning? What gets you excited about making, and like make work about that. It doesn't have to be overly intellectual. It doesn't have to be like overly researched, but find something that you're passionate about and make 20 pieces of work about that thing. It's not to say you can't kind of flex, like, oh, I did this and I did that, but like, I would say at least some sort of thematic cohesion in a portfolio really stands out and makes for a really strong portfolio.
Thank you so much, everybody. I really wish that we could all be here until like 10 p.m. because every question that comes in, I just feel and remember so vividly. So again, I'll just say for anybody that doesn't get their question answered tonight, one of the great things about the spreadsheet is that in addition to having faculty contacts, it also has for programs who were able to supply it. We asked them to give names of former students who would be willing to become contacted to speak about their experiences. So if you're wondering, like, if they say this, is it really this? There will be people for you to reach out to. And at least in my experience, former students are pretty generous with their time and want to share. The print community is pretty great that way. So I think one question, and then maybe Steve, you'll ask one more after. Louisa Caetano says, what are some tips and suggestions you have on deciding where to apply? We know it's a competitive process and we want to make the most of our experience. We don't want to feel like we don't belong in that environment or it's not bringing out the best in us. So what were some criteria that you all used, or how do you maybe coach prospective applicants to ultimately decide what's right for them?
That's tough. I think what you just mentioned, Katie, reaching out to current grads, maybe before you apply, or reaching out to faculty at different institutions before you apply, doing that research and kind of looking through the spreadsheet that Steve organized, because those, sorry, there's a motorcycle. Those questions are going to, a lot of those kind of detailed questions about funding, about, you know, how many years, about all of those things can be answered through research. And then I think afterwards, visiting if you can, I think is really, really good. Yeah.
I gave myself really simple criteria to narrow down the list initially. And it was, I wanted to work with a strong woman. I needed a print shop with windows, and I was going to be west of the Mississippi. It's still, then I just like asked a lot of people. And what I did is I went on a trip the year before I applied, and I visited all the places. I like made my mom go on a road trip, and we just went to all of them and like saw our friends that lived there. And to me, that was absolutely the thing that helped me decide, because I could look the person in the eye who I would be working with and be near them and show them my work if they were, you know, available. And it really, really helped. So, you know, I don't know exactly. I mean, it's a tough question. It's so much to do with fit.
Yeah, I think again, it comes down to like really assessing and figuring out what you want to get out of a graduate experience. And so, yeah, certain schools are suited towards different things. When I was getting ready to go to grad school, I looked at artists that I really admired and looked at what schools they went to. And that was something that was really helpful for me to narrow things down. Actually, this is like just anecdotally, I took about 4 years off between undergrad and grad school, and made a lot of work and tried to show a lot. And I was in a group show at the IPCNY, I think it's called the Print Center in New York. And Julie Moretu was in the show, and I didn't really know who Julie Moretu was, but I really liked her piece. And so I contacted her gallery, and I did a little research and saw where she went to school. And she went to the same school that a number of other artists I really liked went to. So I was like, oh, I should apply to that school. And I reached out to her gallery, and I was like, hey, I'd like to talk to this person. In the meantime, I realized like, wow, this is a huge person. Like, she was in the Venice Biennale, she was in the Whitney Biennial, and all these like massive shows. So after I contacted the gallery, I realized like, oh, there's no way I'm going to hear from Julie Moretu. And then about 2 weeks later, Julie Moretu called me on the phone, right? Like, because artists are, even like rock star artists, are just normal human beings and usually quite accessible and friendly. And so I guess in my case, like, I found an artist whose work I really liked, and I reached out to them and asked them like, what helped you decide to go to grad school, and like where you went, like what advice would you give? And the advice she gave was essentially what I was doing, which was like, look at artists you admire and see where they went to grad school and go visit those schools. So yeah, that was and yeah, reach out to people for sure. That said, also, I'm noticing like in the questions, this is a slight aside, but there's like, for all of us, I think there's specific questions directed to us, and I don't want to speak for everyone on the panel, but I have a feeling this is probably true of everyone, but certainly for me, I'll say like, reach out to me individually. I believe my contact info is in the spreadsheet. So feel free, if I don't get to your question, please do reach out. I see a lot of heads nodding in the panel, so I think that probably goes for everyone.
Alrighty. Are any more comments on that question before we hop into our last one? So I think we're going to revisit our final question from our initial list. Seems like a good way to wrap things up. So what do your graduate students say they wish they'd known before enrolling in your grad program?
I can speak on that one as a current grad student at OU. I think it was kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but really encouraging to research the place, visit if there is ability to, mostly because some people don't know what they're getting into when they come to Athens, like Melissa mentioned. It is a very Appalachian place and a smaller city, and I think that applies to every grad program in general. Also, specific to this program, we also offer like different certificates that are really cool and neat. So it's important to like research those. We have like museum studies certificate, and we also have visual arts management certificate. So if those are of interest, getting ahead of that when you come in is important. And like others mentioned, talking to current grad students, past grad students, getting the feel of what everything, how it works, saying if, you know, you get along with the people that you talk to. I think that's really important. And it feels like kind of going back to the earlier question of like large cohort, smaller cohort, seeing what fits those needs best, because we are a larger program. If you want more not to talk to as many people, then maybe, you know, you might go a different direction. But those are kind of things that pop up. Also, with this being a college town, university, the housing market is pretty competitive. So, and I'm sure that's true of other programs as well that are in college towns. So getting ahead of the game with housing is really important. So those are kind of just grad specific things.
Yeah, I think those are all good things to consider as no matter where you're going, you know, thinking about housing, thinking about the location, visiting if you can. I also think this was true of me as a student going into grad school. Like it is very different than being an undergrad, you know, and I had a super close relationship with my undergraduate professor, and she was kind of like, you know, it might take time for you to develop those relationships where you go, so you have like, you know, you have to kind of seek that out too. I think that's you have to be kind of like a self-starter and like knowing, you know, writing emails and reaching out to people who you want to work with. We're here and we want to work with you. But you also kind of have to like take that first step sometimes, which I think can be an adjustment for people. You know, if you are coming soon after undergrad and you're used to having like this super tightly scheduled life, you know, you have to figure out a way to make your own schedule work for you. Yeah, that I think I also asked some of my grads, and there has been I've been at UNL for a year now, so there was, you know, there was kind of like a changeover where there wasn't someone full-time there for a little bit, and so it was, I think that was kind of a different period for my third year grad right now. Anyway, yeah, that's all I have to add to that. I don't know if Santiago has anything about grads that you think they wish they'd known before they came, or something that often first year students are getting, you know, trying to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always really impressed with how like savvy and proactive the grads are, and they're just increasingly more and more so. Just I would say, just don't be shy about advocating for yourself and just asking questions, whether it's financial or just sociopolitical environment of the area, whatever it might be, things that will impact your living environment for 2 or 3 years. Those are all contributing factors. And ask if there's systems in place to assist you with all those concerns. One of the things that I do as grad chair with the director, Francisco, is we meet with our grads at the beginning of every semester just to listen to them. So if there are concerns that arise, we do our best to just resolve those situations, and they encompass everything, stipends, hourly work week, mental health, just lots of things. And so we are here to advocate for our grads, and I'm sure that it's similar in the other institutions as well. So don't be shy to ask for yourself.
Yeah, so the question was like, what do grads say? What do like people who finish the program say that they wish they had known going into it? And I think that it's at least at Cranbrook, I'll say it's a lot of it's not so much what they wish they'd known. I think it's sort of wish they say they wish they had understood the sort of like breadth of it. And Cranbrook does a lot of, in marketing material and recruitment stuff, talks a lot about community and how important community is in the art world. And I go around and talk about that as well, and talk about like, it's a really small world, right? A lot of us know each other. And I think that in some ways is like a sort of abstract idea when you're applying to grad school, but when people graduate art school, especially like Cranbrook is situated about 30 minutes north of the city of Detroit, which has this like really beautifully blossoming art scene at the moment. And it's like the Detroit art scene is in a position that's like, it's actually really turning into something exciting, but it's also small enough that you can easily, if you have a spare bedroom in your apartment, you can open up and program some like create a curatorial project out of almost nothing, right? And so what I'm finding students, as much as I say like, the people who are next to you, the people you're sharing studio space with could be, future curators. They could be organizing shows. They could be the people who are writing about your work in not too many years. And I think that's a really like abstract idea. But when I have grads come back to me, they're like, oh my God, so-and-so who graduated a year before me just curated me into a show. And like one of the current students is like writing about it. And it's exactly what you said. I was like, yeah. So it's not, it's maybe less of like, what they'd wish they had known. I think they knew it, but it's like actually sort of experiencing it in real life is a pretty exciting thing. Knowing it and experiencing it, I guess, are very, very different things.
That is such a nice place to end, I think, especially with Sophie sort of saying like it's not undergrad. The difference between sort of experiencing something where you maybe look at people as being in more positions of authority, and then in grad school where you're driving the bus a little bit more and the people around you are really your colleagues. So I echo all of that, and I just can't thank you all enough for the insight you provided. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your resources. Thank you, Steve, for making this spreadsheet. I really hope all of you in the audience share it with each other. And please also, if you want to let us know on Instagram or some other way that you're using it, I think that is a really big, important thing for a volunteer-run organization like MAPC, especially with a board that changes over every 2 years. It's public feedback that helps us understand what initiatives we should be pursuing again. So if this is helpful to you and you really want somebody in the future to keep putting in that grunt work that Steve has been putting in, please let us know. In the meantime, we really hope that it's helpful for you. It's so nice to see so many of you coming out. And as I look and I see all these awesome names of print, it's exciting to think about all of you attendees who are coming and how you're going to be the future names of print. And we can't wait to meet you. So thank you, everybody. Again, this will be recorded and it's available, spreadsheets available on our site, but I hope you have a good night.